Okay, and then awesome. Do you want to put the agenda up?
Mhm.
And I'm going to give you possession of that for later because I won't be here. So to get started, I'm Colleen Norton. I'm the city clerk. In April of every year when our boards turn, I come in and do some training. Laura is going to tag team training with me. So did it come up? I went into the room. Oh, goodness, Grady. We're struggling. You don't have to be let in, you're not waiting. Maybe use this. You probably need a key.
I don't know, just let me share. I joined. Sharing.
I was just not sharing.
Yeah, I don't know why. That could be a problem with PowerPoint. Hold on, technical difficulties, folks. Don't we love technology?
I can join it.
So what I'll do is just recognize we have 5 members with us tonight. We do have a 6th member, Tom Akonapuli, who could not be with us tonight. He's new. And then on the 15th council will appoint another new member. So next month you will have a full board. We're going to go through and do an overview training, go over Colorado open meetings law. Some of you have been through this before. We're going to go over FORA, which is Colorado Open Records Act, use of city email versus your personal. And we'll have an opportunity to go around, have everyone do some introductions, talk about what brought you to this board, why it interests you, how long you've been on it. And at one point we will do nominations and elections of a new chair, a vice chair. Is it still not letting me share? Okay. Hold, please. The wrong one. Who knows?
Are you showing up as?
Yeah, it's no. Maybe invite. I'm gonna invite you.
I learned you only invite through the email part of that.
Really? Okay.
So I learned the other day.
I love it. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We tried this last. You should have an email.
Bread is good.
And there we go.
It's exactly the same.
Technology be darned. So, our council liaison is not here today. So we won't have an address from them. We will do some orientation and training. And then we will go through and do some member introductions. During training, if you have any questions, need clarification, please don't hesitate to ask. There will also be an opportunity at the end of training for more questions. Did you want to pull up the PowerPoint since we're ready to get going? But again, real quick before we start, just so you know who staff is here, I'm Colleen Norton, I'm your city clerk.
I'm Laura Rosenbaum, Sustainability Coordinator.
Brent Soderlund, Director of Public Works and Utilities.
And so Brent and Laura are always going to be here. I will not. So again, this was actually prepared in conjunction with the city manager's office, my office, and our city attorney's office, as well as Laura. So we'll have to update the front slide because you had some as well. Role of advisory board. So this is an advisory board. This board has no quasi judicial responsibility. Which means that we do not act by motions, seconds, or votes. We act by consensus. Because we're not actually moving forward anything legislative. Okay. Council serves as your legislative body here. They are the ones who are responsible for setting policies for the city. They will enact ordinances related to land use in other areas. Anything that updates or amends our city code is done with city council through input from staff. We take everything to them and then they act on it either as is or amended. And then they are also responsible for making sure that all of our boards and commissions, whether advisory or quasi judicial, are staffed with folks that A want to be here and participate, and B are qualified and can bring the most to whatever the responsibility of that board is. And then they will also provide some direction on what they are hoping for or want to get out of each board.
Just to bring our new member up to speed, is we had a study session was that last week? What is time? Last week. And we got sort of the go-ahead to move forward with waste diversion efforts that the city's been working on, as well as electrification of the built environment and water conservation and water works. So I'm sure we'd love your input on other direction if you have it, or have any other comments on that, but just wanted to provide that too.
Am I the only new member?
No.
In the room, yes.
Currently. Yes, in general, though. There are two other new members, one of which couldn't attend today and one of which was appointed today, so a little last minute for her, but.
And not formally appointed yet,
Right.
so direction was given to bring it forward to council for appointment, so. But yes,
today,
in the
yes.
room, yes.
Happy to be here.
And you got cake, so.
So far, so good.
There you go. Let's keep it up, Gretel.
Yeah.
So the city charter and the city code, Littleton is a home rule municipality. So our charter does serve as our local constitution. It really is the framework for how the city operates and is governed. And then our city code are our local statutes or laws. We are allowed as a home rule to be more restrictive than state statute. We cannot be more lenient than state statute. And more often than not, we try to align with state statute, but there are some areas of the code where as a home rule municipality, we certainly take advantage of the fact that we do have the right to enact our. You want to talk about this?
Sure. So this is just a snapshot for y'all of the current strategic plan that council is going by. It's called Horizon 2027. It's also linked later in this document, which I can send out again tomorrow. As it goes with sustainability, in my mind, we cross all of these main points, which are in the gray box on the far right. But I mean, the big one that I always go back to is sustainable community. So I mean, that one is a good one to reference in terms of tying our work back to strategic planning. And also in this document is implementing ESB's plan. So that's also very good evidence for when I go to council, and it's always good to be able to reference back to it. So this is kind of our current guideposts. So just wanted to flag that for everyone. And it's also on this, these are all hyperlinked in the PDF that I'll send out. So if you wanna read through all of the riveting hundreds of pages of all these, you can.
It's a lot. And you'll notice Robert's Rules of Orders there. we operate, again, as this is an advisory board and we're not acting by motions and seconds and votes and things like that. Even the city as a whole, we kind of operate under what we like to call Bob's rules, right? It's Robert's rules, but it's like Robert's rules light. And council has taken Robert's rules and then as part of their legislative rules, have made some modifications to how they operate. Robert's rules is very formal, can be very stuffy. And for someone who doesn't live in it all the time, I'm a clerk and I'm a nerd about that stuff. I'm actually a certified parliamentarian, which is not sexy or exciting. But Bob's rules is just a little kinder and gentler, right? But certainly read these documents. And did we email out the board and commission handbook? Okay, so you've got everything you need. And if there are any questions on any of these, don't hesitate to reach out and ask for clarification.
And that bottom one is a link to the Environmental Stewardship Action Plan, so it's the one that y'all, I think most of the people in this room helped create sort of before I started, but also could be a good, I hate to call you out again, but could be a good reference for you as you're starting to understand the work that's sort of already been put in place or planned.
Okay, role of department staff. The first bullet point really isn't applicable to this board at this time. But your department staff being Laura and Brent, primarily Laura, she will be responsible for preparing an agenda. Once we have a chair and vice chair elected, Laura does work with the chair and vice chair for input on those agendas and what they look like coming forward. So if any board member has something that they really want to see on agenda, then you work with your chair and vice chair so they can work with Laura. There really is kind of a chain of command and a hierarchy. And Laura can speak to this a little bit too, but she kind of schedules things out months ahead of time as appropriate, and potentially bringing in guest speakers or things like that that can kind of match up with what's going to be on the agenda. And we really want those to be cohesive and not overburdened. We want it to be a reasonable size so that you can get through it in the 2 hours that you've allotted for your meeting time. And then any staff reports that need to be prepared, like for the study session last week with city council, staff will take care of those kinds of things, certainly with input from board members. And then is always there to answer questions and things like that. And the city clerk's office works with the board liaisons to make sure that rooms are reserved, technology works or doesn't. We update the website to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements under Colorado Open Meetings Law, that we are noticing your meetings, where they're being held, when they're being held, what's going to be discussed. The meetings are recorded. These are for lack of a better term, these are considered as advisory boards, they're study sessions. So because no action is being taken, we don't do minutes for them, but we do record the meetings. Those get posted on the website and therefore become the minutes of the meeting. And that way people can watch it, they can go back, they can see it, and they see it in real time. They see inflection, they see body language. They get it verbatim, right? There's no summarizing or things like that. And then I'm always available with questions as well. And then we will consult with the city attorney's office in the instance that we may need some legal guidance on something.
So I wanted to add this just as we're voting in a new chair and vice chair, just to level set. It's not a ton of extra work. I mean, y'all can attest that, I hope. But it's just, I usually prepare an agenda, send it to the chair and vice chair, and if they want to discuss, we schedule like a 30-minute meeting, or if it doesn't, if everything just looks normal, they just email back, great, sounds good. the biggest thing I think is the board chair leading the meeting process. So, you know, reading some of the official language and timing public comments and all of that, as well as you saw in the study session, when like sort of taking that direction or other presentations to council as necessary. And then the vice chair is kind of stepping in as, you know, I guess as a backup for all of those processes, as well as a new direction we've been told is to have to send summaries, I suppose, of meetings. And so I just put in here the vice chair to take just like high level notes, because I'm so in the weeds on these meetings that I like when I go to write a summary, I'm just like, you know, all of it seems important. Whereas someone that's just taking a couple bullets, I'll just expand on that for council. I'm happy to clarify any other questions y'all may have as we go into those, you know, that election process, or if you have any comments on it now or concerns. Both, yeah.
And to your point with the summaries, what council's really looking at, you know, because Littleton, even though it's a medium-sized city, it's a small town. And everyone knows everyone, and you run into each other at the grocery store, out to dinner, or wherever. Council really wants to just be updated if anything major or potentially controversial or whatever has come up at a meeting, right? They want to hear about it from staff and the board before they hear about it in line at the grocery store. You know, just kind of thing. And so it's less about doing kind of these high level summaries and more about going, hey, word on this could get out. Let's make sure they know about it ahead of time, right? And just kind of being able to send that quick email with, these are things we discussed. This is the direction we're going. Without getting too far in the weeds.
And then the rest is just general board members, so communicating if there's an anticipated absence, so that could be any monthly meetings, joint study sessions, or if we decide to hold a non-regular meeting, so we usually meet the first Wednesday of every month, 6:30. So if there's another meeting that we need to have for some reason, just letting us know. And then also on here, which I think most of you do, if you do miss a meeting, ideally you can commit to watching the recording. You can do it on whatever speed you want. No one's looking at that, but just to be up to date on what's happening and what you missed, so that when you come back, you're able to participate. And then also I'm available for any one-on-one meetings, person, electronic, just to finish work products for board or council meetings, just as we need those. We can't have more than, I think.
Yeah, we'll get to that with open meetings law. So anytime there are 3 or more members of a board, it constitutes an actual meeting. It needs to be posted. It needs to be open to the public, and all of those things. So if we're doing one-on-ones, or even the chair and the vice chair with Laura, we aren't in violation of the open meetings law, but we just really want to be very cognizant of that. That does not mean, and we'll get to that a little bit more, but again, medium-sized city, small town, some of y'all are gonna cross paths out in the real world or in the wild, as I like to call it. And that doesn't mean that you can't have conversations with each other or end up at the same social function. It does mean that if there are 3 or more of you, you cannot talk about city business outside of a noticed meeting. And Laura touched on, if you're not gonna be able to attend, you know, just let Laura know, let the chair know. But we really do want to stress that attendance in person is always preferred, just because I think there's a lot of stuff you guys need to get through. There are some big things you're going to be discussing, and the more voices in the room, the more opinions in the room are going to have a greater impact on the direction of the board.
And I will say that there's already a lot of different speakers lined up. They're very, very popular right now. If people reaching out to me left and right, I'm like, well, that's gonna be July, so it'll be exciting. But there's a lot of interest and collaboration, so.
It's a good problem. I like that.
Exactly.
So the Colorado Sunshine Law, this is the open meetings law. All meetings of a quorum or 3 or more members of any local public body, and it doesn't matter if you're quasi judicial, if you're advisory. If you are a formulated government body, which this board is, if there are 3 or more of you, then we need to post that and make it public. There are times when our city council are going to be participating in something that is largely social. And we still, just out of an abundance of caution, will post 3 or more maybe in attendance, just to make sure, right? Like, we always want to err on that side and be cautious that we aren't in violation of the open meetings law. So what is a meeting? And this can be in person, it can be electronic, it can be, and we'll talk a little bit about this, it can be an email chain. It can be a text chain if you've included a bunch of people, so we recommend not doing that. If you need to send an email to the board, we recommend that that actually come from staff. And then we tend to BCC the entire board, so that if a singular member replies to it, you're not replying all, and you're not creating that electronic ad hoc meeting that then could put us in violation of the open meetings law. This includes your city issued email, which new members will get information on your new city email and how to set that up. We do recommend that you use your city email for anything that is board related. So you'll want to make sure that you're checking that at least once a month, preferably more often, but at least once a month to get your agenda and packet materials. If it's something, you know, I have from time to time sent it to city email addresses and personal email addresses. I don't like to do that, but I do have some boards that maybe only meet once or twice a year. And so for boards that aren't meeting on a regular basis, it's a little bit harder for them to keep up with their city email. So if we have email chains going back and forth, just saying, hey, when are you guys going to be available for this? And we're trying to find that. That's not a meeting, right? Like, we're just trying to schedule something. Social events, if you all happen to be at one of the little jams, you know, and you get to talking, that's not a violation unless you start talking about city business. Again, medium city, small town, lots of ears. And then also be cautious of social media. If you're including all of your board members and you start talking about your environmental stewardship plan, or you're talking about Horizon 2027 and how you fit in that, just be very careful of that, so that we're not in violation of the open meetings law. So full and timely notice to the public, minimum of 24 hours ahead of time. And that speaks to the agenda. The agenda can't just say we are having a meeting. The agenda must say what we plan on discussing and doing at that meeting. And when practicable, if there are attachments or documents, we should include those as well. But at a bare minimum, we have to post it, and we have to have specific agenda information. The city council at the beginning of every year by resolution adopts where our notices are to be posted. One is our website, and then we also post in 3 physical locations, which is this building, our municipal courthouse, and the Bemis Public Library. So there are paper agendas in those locations and our website. And we actually have a couple places on our website where we post. We post on the website calendar, and then there is a meetings and agendas page, which is not the official page, but it's actually the page where I think the majority of our citizens go to find the information. And so we post on that page as well. So we are actually posting in 5 locations, even though we really just have 3. So what happens if we violate the open meetings law? A citizen could take action, they could file suit. It has happened before, not here. I don't have wood to knock on, but, you know, there could be monetary damages awarded. The biggest part for me, though, is loss of public trust in the board and in the city in general. And that really, we work really hard. I mean, we have missed postings in the past. I'm not gonna lie and say it hasn't happened, but we really strive to make sure that doesn't happen. And so we really count on our boards too, to make sure that they're adhering to those open meeting laws. It also can undermine overall trust and transparency of the government. Like if citizens hear or find out that these ad hoc meetings are happening and we didn't post, then it really does kind of undermine that trust. And we really want to be as transparent as possible at all times. And if it's a continued pattern, it could be cause for removal from the board. CORA, so the Colorado Open Records Act, all records of the city are open for inspection by any person at any time. They do have to go through a process to request specific records. They can't just walk in and say, I want to look through that drawer, right? Like there has to be a process for how they request records and what they're requesting, but that can include emails. So not only the city emails, which we would handle as a city, but it can include if you are using a personal device and using your personal email and conducting business outside of those parameters of the city email, your personal email can become subject to discovery. Now, if they submit a CORA, I have no way to get into your email. They're gonna have to go through some kind of actual external legal process to get that. I have heard of that happening in other cities, bigger cities, not here, but just don't set yourself up to being subject to that. Just be very cautious of what you're discussing, either on your personal device via group text or emails. Even though it's unlikely that it would happen, there's still a very slim possibility. So just don't subject yourself to it. Just to avoid liability, know our charter, code sections that apply to your board, know the limits of your authority and what this board has been tasked with. Conflicts of interest and ex parte communications for those that aren't attorneys. Ex parte communications are those conversations that happen outside of the public realm. It really refers more to kind of that quasi judicial aspect when we have boards like Planning Commission, Historical Preservation, Building Board of Appeals and Adjustment, and certainly City Council, and our Licensing Commission. If they've been presented with something that is going to be part of a public hearing and they're having communications with each other outside of a public realm. And so to an extent, an advisory board as well, but it really is primarily a quasi judicial thing. Just don't have those conversations and set yourself up for potential issues. And if you're not sure if that's a conversation you should be having, or if it's going to put you at risk, reach out to staff, reach out to the clerk's office. If we don't have an answer, we'll talk to the attorney's office and get you one. Any questions, comments, concerns for either me, Laura, Brent? I know most of you have been through this. Okay. You can get at any time tonight. Now, I'm not going to be here the whole night, but if you have questions that come up or you think of something when you get home, shoot us an email. So at this point, let's just go around the table. We'll have members introduce themselves. What drew you to the board? How long you've been on the board? Things like that. Scott, you want to start?
Sure.
You could just
Yeah.
call Sandra.
Address separate.
Andrew, welcome. I'm Scott and I'm the outgoing chair. And what made me interested in the board is all the stuff we put in the values section of our action plan, which I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to take a look at soon.
Andrew?
I'm Andrew. I think I joined about just a year ago, and I'm an environmental engineer, wastewater engineer, and so obviously environmental stuff is my jam. I moved to Littleton just August of 23, so not too long ago, but wanted to become active in the community, and this is, I think, a good place for that. Welcome.
I'm Gretel Val. And I've been on the committee since it started. What, 2 years now? I've lived in Littleton for like 25 years. And I'm a third grade teacher, but environmental stewardship is my passion.
And pumpkin chocolate chip.
And baking and bringing snacks to our meetings.
My name's Hannah Kite. I'm the outgoing vice chair. I was on Next Generation Advisory Committee when we recommended to council that the Environmental Stewardship Board was created. So I was happy to kind of parlay into that. I live and work in Littleton. I work for Breckenridge Brewery. I'm the environmental and safety manager there, so in and out of environmental things amongst a lot of other things all day, every day. And then I'm also working on my master's in sustainability as well, so.
Cool. Well, good to meet everyone. I'm the new guy. Andrew Hicks. Similar to the other Andrew, I recently moved here, February 2024, so a few months after you. And yeah, I was looking around for different ways to get involved, plug into the community, and this is one of the things that, you know, popped up on my radar that I thought perhaps would be interesting, good use of my time, somewhere to contribute, and hopefully I can make a contribution. So my background, started my career as like an energy efficiency engineer, building basically industrial equipment for buildings. Then I spent the next like 10 years or so working in international agricultural development. Now I work in basically like forest conservation and restoration. So I have some kind of like mixed background and touching on some different, you know, relevant environmental topics. Yeah, looking forward to getting to know all of you and to plugging in and seeing where I can make an impact.
Okay, so now we're at the part of the evening that either goes really smoothly or nobody wants to step up. So what we will do is entertain nominations for board chair. And then once we have a nomination or two, we'll allow those folks to talk about if they want to accept the nomination, and if so, why they would want to be chair. And then we'll go around the room and do one of the few times that we do actually act by a motion, a second. So is anyone interested in being chair? There is no shame in self-nomination. You know, be loud and be proud. Or is there anyone who wants to nominate someone for board chair?
I mean, it's, I wanna be.
I know. I mean, I don't mind, it's okay. The whole meeting with the city council and like being in charge of that kind of stuff is definitely not in my comfort zone at all. Just so you know, like if they were 9, I'd be okay with it, but it's hard for me it's just a whole new thing is
You
presenting.
had a really strong vice chair.
Grown-ups.
Mind doing that.
That would be lovely. That would be ideal. So,
And you could always split up the presentations.
Mhm.
like, I don't mind the whole,
It doesn't have to be chair or vice chair, it's
we need a couple people to just do stuff and stuff.
an easy default.
I don't mind, it's okay.
So are you
I
nominating?
nominate Granville.
I love it. I love it.
Andrew, do you have any interest?
I hesitate to commit to more things right now in general, so I don't.
Okay. Okay, well, we have a nomination for Gretel, and Gretel has stated that she's okay with it. Yes.
Somebody needs to do it.
I know you're new, but do you have any interest in chair?
What are the responsibilities again?
You basically run the meeting, you call the meeting to order, you follow down the agenda, you make sure that we're timing folks for public comment. We allow public comment, and each speaker who wants to speak, it's 3 minutes. just kind of guiding the board. You are always gonna have staff here as backup. We're not throwing anyone to the wolves. And if you don't have an interest in chair, maybe vice chair, or maybe you would like to be interested in chair, this chair might be a great jumping off for you. So talk amongst yourselves. I know we have a nomination here for Gretel. But
I would second the nomination for Gretel,
Thanks.
for chair. Having been a part of the board since the beginning and, being the person that brought the excellent cake and, being a public servant as a teacher, I think that that's a good, person.
So many reasons.
And
so many reasons.
honestly, the fact that you didn't jump up and say it has to be me, that honestly, that's like even more reason for me to think it should be you. So I walked in here less than an hour ago though, so.
Okay,
But we would still need a vice chair.
well, yeah, but we'll get to that in a minute.
A strong vice chair.
Okay, with no other nominations, I would entertain a motion and a second to appoint Gretel Pavao as Chair of Environmental Stewardship.
Be my privilege to, to move that Gretel be chair of our environmental stewardship board.
Second. Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Vote for myself.
With a vote, yeah, you can vote for yourself, Gretel.
Or can I just abstain?
You're present.
Yeah, okay, with a vote of 5-0, Gretel Pavao is our new board chair. Okay, we'll go through the same process now for vice chair. Is there anyone who wants to nominate someone or step up as vice chair? Which, you know, like the first runner-up in Miss America, right? You fill in if the chair cannot fulfill their responsibilities. And you work closely with staff.
That's scary, I promise.
Hardly ever, hardly ever is she scary. I just learned to say yes to her.
I'm happy to do vice chair again. I know earlier I had said I would not, but I'm happy to do vice chair if you should have me.
Okay, I nominate Hannah.
That would be awesome.
Okay, anybody else want to self-nominate or anybody want to nominate someone else? I mean, I know you walked in here less than an hour.
No, I think this is
It's okay, get
an
your.
arrangement. Yeah.
Okay, with no other nominations, I would entertain a motion and a second.
Okay, I nominate Hannah.
Second.
Too kind.
Okay, all in favor of appointing Hannah Kite as vice chair of ESB? It was 5 in favor. Congratulations, Hannah, as vice chair. Okay.
Strong vice chair.
Outgoing and incoming.
Yeah.
Before I adjourn the transitional meeting and make my exit, any questions that anyone has thought of? Okay, it is 7:12. I will adjourn the transitional meeting and turn it over to the board chair. Gretel, it's all yours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do we ever have a sign-in sheet ever anymore?
If you, I can start bringing one if you want.
Well, I don't know. It just always says that, please sign in on the public speaker form, but we never have one.
That's true, that is confusing, I suppose.
We can make sure that one's provided. Absolutely.
I mean, I hate to.
Or we
waste
can be
paper,
less
but
formal in this setting and take that off of
I can take it off.
Let's just take it off.
the agenda and just be a
So
little
we
less
don't
formal.
waste paper each
Yeah, that's, that would make sense.
It's not really in the spirit of the environmental strategy.
time. Yeah, it's not.
I know.
Good night, thank you.
Good to see you.
you.
Good to see you, Scott.
Okay.
Would you like to?
Do you want to speak?
Sorry, did you open the regular meeting?
I think you have to read this line if you wish.
Oh, okay, sorry. If you wish to address the committee under public comment, please sign in on the public speaker form prior to the call to order of this meeting, and each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes.
And sorry, I missed roll call as well, but I guess. Did you?
Oh, he's presenting.
Oh, no, you're the speaker.
Yes.
Just making sure. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block or so from here, and a couple of things. First, I'll just say when I was coming, I saw 2 towhees and a downy woodpecker. So good signs of life. I've advocated for some kind of wildlife or life count as well as vegetation. We talk about tree surveys and stuff like that. I want life surveys, bats, bees, and butterflies and other things. So I'm just gonna report to you. I saw a couple of travelers today, and good news. You know, the presentation you just heard can often sound overwhelming and negative. And I'm gonna let you know that weirdly to me, a lot of people who come to serve on boards and commissions have never been a member of public watching the meetings. And so they don't have the appreciation for these are meetings for the public. This is a public service job. The table you sit at, the chairs you sit in, the air that's ventilated here is all paid for by taxpayer dollars. You should want passionately to share what you do with the public. There should be minutes on the website. The documents that you produce should be on the website. It is a marketing feature for you, and it engages the public. And so let me just kind of say, all of these rules sound negative and burdensome, are really there for a reason. If you see it and participate from the public side, you see the reasons why. So please, don't let them seem like a burden. These are good things. The core and open meetings law is really, really important. The sunshine laws, without them, we would not be America. So it's really important. And let's see. So one more comment about South Suburban Parks and Rec. Your work on that showed at the study session. For the past couple of regular city council meetings, people have been distributing the South Suburban Parks and Rec ballot sign-up sheets. So the word is out. Good job, because South Suburban Parks and Rec needs reform, and you guys are leading that way. I did want to make a comment about waste collection. I hope that folks can get used to calling it contracted waste services, because I always believe in more than one. There's got to be at least 2 contractors. It can be commercial, residential. It can be kind of the concierge service for people who say, I only want pickup on Mondays. I don't want to pick up any other day. And then other people would be kind of normal, cheaper service, whatever it is. 2 are always good. It's always good to have competition in your contractors. I also want to speak for Public Works to restore the free collection events that the city used to provide: hazardous waste collection, large item drop-off, and fall leaf collection. Under Mark Ralph, those were done away with. I want them back. The city has actually upped its code enforcement, and so please consider getting our city to provide those free services to the public.
Before I welcome our guest speaker, there's just a couple of events coming up that I wanted to plug for Earth Month, so happy April. And I'll also I sent this out, I think, with the agenda, but I'll send it out again with this PDF. So this one's April 14th, this one's all about waste, and so A1 Organics will be there. They'll be giving out free compost bags, a finished compost, as well as, I think, golf tees, maybe they have that down here. A free bucket of balls. So take your pick. There's this event on April 23rd, which is more sustainable business oriented. So, and I don't know if are you a panelist at that event? Okay. That's what Aiden told me. So that's exciting. And this will have all the information for y'all to register as well. And then this is just like general updates. So the new transportation master plan, that whole process is starting in 2026. So if you can't, if you can't make this meeting, I suppose that's That already happened. Okay, I sent this via email, so sorry about that. I think there's also the survey is still out though. And then this one's April 26th. I sadly can't be at this one, but there will be other city staff tabling there. And so this was I think started by, Juniper Seed Mercantile. And so that's just an event for anyone in the public, and it'll have, it sort of puts it down here. I don't know if Hannah, you have any other context on this one or?
I do not. Is that address in front of Juniper Seed Mercantile?
You know, I should know that, but I'm very directionally challenged, so I don't feel confident in telling you for sure on that side. And then this is the last one. Figured I need to just keep plugging this. South Suburban is electing someone new for a couple of new people, I think, for their board of directors. This is more information to learn about the candidates as well as the election and requesting an absentee ballot. And I might be working with IT some to see if I can get these up for the rest of the public too, just so everyone's up to date, but I think these are also things.
I guess the one thing about the South Suburban candidates is that Amy Conklin, who was a former member of this board, she's holding it's like an event at Kiln Workspaces in Littleton.
Oh,
That's 2650 West Bellevue Avenue tomorrow night. It's I guess it's a meet and greet from 5 to 6, and then a candidate forum from 6 to 7:15. I can share this or two. So.
great. And apologies for a little bit of the wait here, but we're really excited to have Colorado Communities for Climate Action. And if you wanna come sit, you can. We're really casual. If you prefer to stand while you present. I can give you my laptop so you can navigate your presentation if that's easiest for you.
I remembering her that Amy Conklin was on the council.
She was at one point, yes.
That is,
She's been everywhere.
got it.
So you just get down, when you need to change slides. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Madam Chair, Madam Vice. It's good to meet y'all. My name is Jacob Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Communities for Climate Action, CC4CA. And I think my job this evening is just give you an introduction to what we are and what we do and how it works. And that hopefully answer any questions you might have, and that gives you information that would be helpful to you in figuring out if it makes sense to explore Littleton becoming a member of the coalition. So I'm just gonna give a quick overview of what we are, what we do, and happy to interrupt me, and then also plenty of time. I'm happy to stick around as long as you have questions or to pick me out. So please, ask me anything that comes up for you. The CC4CA is a coalition of local governments. We're 44 cities, towns, counties around the state. It's just under a third of the state's population represented by our members. And I'll show you a list of the members in a minute, but you'll see there a bunch of Front Range, a bunch of West Slope. There's very small communities, very large counties. It's kind of the whole mix. And our mission fundamentally is advocate for stronger climate policy at the state level primarily. We do a little bit of federal, but it's mostly at the state level. And the premise was basically some individual jurisdictions that realized as individual jurisdictions, they had almost no voice in these state policy processes. When you're at the Capitol testifying on a bill, if you're lucky, your own state rep or your own state senator cares what you think. But nobody else there is going to care because they all represent other jurisdictions. But if you get a bunch of jurisdictions together and speak with one voice, that was the premise, and it's really played out that way. We started in 2017. The original group was 6 jurisdictions. We've grown every year. And I think it's partly because that model really makes sense. A bunch of small jurisdictions and a bunch of local jurisdictions of varying sizes, but speaking with one voice at the Capitol, at rulemaking bodies like the Air Quality Control Commission and the PUC, all of those kinds of venues, and the effects of impact's pretty substantial. This just gives you a sense of high level what we do. The core of it really is this advocacy for stronger policy. And most of that takes place either at the state legislature and the regulatory bodies I just mentioned, as well as the executive branch, state agencies and the governor's office, those kinds of venues where lots of decisions are made, both about, well, some of it's about statute, what the laws are going to be. Some of it's about what the implementing regulations are going to look like. How are those statutes actually implemented? And a lot of it has to do with projects and programs that agencies run, grant programs or other programs that are designed to ideally benefit climate forward projects, and we're there to make sure they actually work for local governments and they actually do what they're supposed to do for climate. We do a little bit federal. I mentioned that before. With federal, it's mostly where we think Colorado congressional delegation members are really going to matter on a decision. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it really does happen sometimes. And a good example would be when we were fighting to get the IRA and the BIL passed, these massive federal funding packages, Senator Hickenlooper actually became this really crucial figure because he had his relationship with Senator Manchin, who was the crucial swing vote. And so we spent a lot of time encouraging, working with Senator Hickenlooper's office to give him all the cover and support he needed to make sure he did everything he could to convince Senator Manchin ultimately to support the funding package. And he did, and we have more work to do federally, but that has resulted already in a whole bunch of money flowing into Colorado and other places. So it's a good example. The biggest shift federally for us was in the aftermath of IRA and BIL. Now there's tons of these programs with tons of money flowing and overwhelming array of opportunities for local governments. So many programs, so many agencies, different requirements, different deadlines, not consolidated anywhere. So we actually shifted a lot of our work to this concierge program. Basically, we have a staff person whose job is help our member local governments with grant applications, with strategizing, which programs might be the best fit, you might be most competitive for. That's still in play. There's still a few programs that at the moment are active, and so we're still doing a bunch of that. Winter Park yesterday just got word of another. This is their third, I think, grant that federal funding that we work with them on. And so that there's still money flowing, obviously severely reduced, but there's also a bunch of state money, some of which is federal, but some of which is coming from other state programs. And we're also now shifting gears. It's basically help our members figure out how to get dollars that help them in their communities with climate forward programs. And then we've also been doing work now on trying to protect some of the funding mechanisms. So we just sent a letter to Congressman Evans, who is one of the newest members of the Colorado delegation, Republican in CD8, incredibly competitive district. It was Dem. Congressman Evans won by a thin margin, unseated the Dem, he's an R, and it's very clear that's a district that can go either way. So we assembled, I think we ended up with about 90 signatures from local elected officials to him that said, hey, please protect these very specific programs for solar and wind, because whatever you think of climate, these are real jobs in your district that are really important to your communities. And he is now one of the Republicans who's calling on the president to protect these specific programs. So where there's a place where we think we can make a difference like that, we engage on the federal side. Most of it is at the state side. And then we do a bunch of other things that are of value to our members, like lots of workshops and briefings and trainings, things like what's the latest science on climate in Colorado that might be important and relevant to local governments? What's happening policy-wise with federal programs that are relevant to local governments? In some cases, it's been like the state adopted a new program. This is a couple of years ago, the state adopted a program. We supported a legislation that enabled local governments to set their own rules for single-use plastics. And at the same time, the state also set a floor for what that looked like across the state. And there were lots of questions from local governments about what that meant. How do local governments, what are their obligations? How do they implement it? Because a piece of that is a revenue stream that goes to local governments. So we worked with EcoCycle, which was one of the lead groups on the legislation in the first place, and put together a primer that and did a webinar for our members on how this is actually going to work. So we do lots of those kinds of resources. And then we do a lot of just keeping folks updated. There's a lot of our members that care what's going on in the legislative session, but just have no staff capacity or other capacity to track it. It's really complex. Things happen quickly, especially now we're in the final month of the session. And so everything happens extremely quickly and in convoluted fashion. And so we make sure all of our members who are interested in tracking are able to track what's happening there, what bills are moving, what bills are really good opportunities for local governments who care about climate, which ones might be really problematic. So a lot of what we do is information sharing. We gather it and we curate it and share it out so that you all are getting, or your council or the city staff are getting information that might be relevant to them. This list of members, I mentioned that already. Westminster just joined. Westminster is an interesting member because they were a member. Their politics flipped and they left the coalition, and then their politics flipped again and they just rejoined. And I mentioned that partly we've never had that happen before, but also because a lot of the growth in recent years has been these purple communities that are not historically super blue or super left or super viewed as super climate forward communities. They're really much more purple communities. And I think that's partly the politics on climate have been slowly shifting, but I think it's also that the actual impacts of climate are felt. Like local governments are really feeling those impacts in more tangible ways. So even the purple communities, it's really clear that when there's a fire and up river from your water source with subsequent debris flows and mudslides and sedimentation, like that stuff has huge impacts to the water districts downstream. And nobody upstream is giving the downstream communities money or the water districts money to upgrade their water treatment facilities or to build diversions so they can turn off the flow when there's a bunch of sediment, or build a separate intake or whatever it might be. So at the mountain communities, the winters now are so warm or erratically temperature so erratic in the winters that the freeze thaw is happening more often, which results in damage to roads, which is a real cost that counties and communities have to deal with, that nobody's saying climate change is happening, so here's some extra money to deal with these added costs. So I think that's been a big driver of the growth in membership in recent years, is just an expansion of the recognition that those are real impacts, and that it's really hard as an individual jurisdiction to have a big impact on greenhouse gas emissions and climate across at the state level or national level. That you can do some things locally for sure, and all of our members do things locally, but they're also members because there are barriers at the state level to them doing more than they can do, than they want to do, or they want to do more than they're able to do because of some state policy that limits what they can do. Or there's just opportunities. If the state were to pass a law that does X, that would enable local governments to do things that they couldn't do otherwise. And transportation is a great example of where local jurisdictions can do a lot from a transportation GHG perspective, but GHG emissions in the sector are massive and mostly driven by decisions that are above the level of individual jurisdictions. It's about state transportation planning, where the state dollars are going, and multimodal investments and all the interconnectivity between modes, all of those things. And so our members join CC4CA and they stay members because they want to engage on those issues, which are just really hard to do at the local level.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
City and County of Denver tends to be one of the more climate forward communities, and I do not see them on the list. And so I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. They're not a member. We have a great relationship with them. Denver's funky. They're large enough and politically, they have enough mass that they tend not to join coalitions, because I think for them, it's like, we don't need to do that.
They kind of have their own momentum and own like advocacy within.
Thousands of climate staff.
Yeah, I don't know that
I think it's like
you would know better than me, actually.
I think maybe close to it, maybe not thousands, like close to it, like in the hundreds.
It's certainly.
It's just me.
So they already have the infrastructure that allows them to support some of these things.
Yeah, and it's also the lobbying side. Denver probably has more lobbyists working for them than any other jurisdiction in the state, I'm gonna guess. And so as far as joining CC4CA to be part of the coalition and have the voice through the coalition, they haven't felt like that makes sense, because they have so much of their own capacity. But we work with them really closely, legislatively, but also on the regulatory side. We're often,
Aligned.
Yeah, in fact, not just aligned, but we often will intervene or participate formally in a rulemaking with Denver as part of, we'll just create a special coalition. We call it the Local Government Coalition. And so that's usually CC4CA plus maybe one or two or three other jurisdictions that want to be part of it. Denver's often part of that. So
That makes sense.
We love them, have a great relationship with them, but so far it just hasn't made sense from their vantage. Yeah, but it's a great Great catch. It isn't, we are a nonprofit and we look like a nonprofit in lots of ways. I'll mention a couple of the ways in which we don't, but the basic structure is very nonprofit-y. There's a board, there's a few committees. We create ad hoc groups when there are specific projects that we need some folks to look at a specific policy issue. We want to dive more deeply, but we don't need to create a standing committee for it. So let's put together some ad hoc that will run for 4 months and look at something carefully and then bring recommendations to the board or something like that. If Littleton ends up becoming a member, you can participate, jurisdiction can participate as much as you want on the board and the committees. One of the things that makes CC4C unusual as a nonprofit is that every jurisdiction has a seat on the board. So on paper, I'll just tell you, it's insane. I run a nonprofit with 44 member board, each of whom represents an entire jurisdiction, which is all of the things that go into the politics of a jurisdiction. So on paper, it's nuts. It actually works astonishingly. I've been doing this kind of work for a long time, and with all due respect to great boards I've had in the past, I've never worked with a board that's this functional. And I think a big part of it is that the organization itself is just purpose-built. We exist for this one purpose, that is to represent local governments that want the state to do a better job on climate policy. And you don't join unless jurisdictions don't join unless they're really aligned with that. And then there's also just a camaraderie, people that work on climate policy. There's just a sort of instant rapport. And we put a lot of effort into the relationships and making sure that we're building and sustaining trust and enabling our members to build their relationships and share knowledge and all of those kinds of things. So on paper, it looks crazy, but in practice, it's actually been extremely effective. And one of the benefits of doing it that way is that every jurisdiction really has the same voice on the board. Doesn't matter if you're a 5,000 person town or a 500,000 person county, it's the same seat, same amount of influence over what happens.
So is it usually elected officials that sit on the board of directors, or is it?
It's all over the map. We leave it to our members. So we don't, from our perspective, doesn't matter. What matters to us is that the person or people that represent the jurisdiction on the board and on the committees they're empowered to represent the jurisdiction. So they can speak and articulate concerns or views or whatever. Beyond that, it's totally up to you. So it's a mix. It's probably half elected, half staff, I'm gonna guess. Some jurisdictions are really tiny and have no capacity. And we have a couple of jurisdictions that even actually appoint somebody from their comparable board like this to represent because they have no staff capacity. So from our perspective, it doesn't matter. It's really up to the jurisdiction. So in this case, it'd be presumably city council, or city council could delegate it to staff, and we don't really care. You just tell us who.
That makes it easy, right?
It's definitely easy for us. I thought I'd mention just a tiny bit about the 24 legislative session. Like I said, we're very near the end of this session, but this just gives you some sense of the scale of the work we do during a legislative session. Lots of bills get introduced. We look at everything that gets introduced to figure out which ones might have a climate nexus. And then we look at all of those to figure out which ones of those are ones that we care about, that are relevant to our members, or relevant from a broader state perspective on climate. And then among those, we have this legislative committee their role is take positions on those bills. So we do the analysis and bring it to the legislative committee and suggest support or amend or whatever it is. And then they decide. They typically they'll do what staff recommends, but not always. A lot like boards and city councils. Often the LegCom will follow our advice, but sometimes they don't. They have concerns that we didn't know about, or they raise them, and we have really interesting conversations, and we end up with a position, and we go from there. So, and then we advocate, like lots of nonprofits that do legislative work. We tier bills, the most important ones down to the least important. And we have lobbyists, contract lobbyists that represent us there, and we spend a lot of time there, and we do a lot of supporting our members, particularly the elected officials who want to testify at the Capitol. So we do a lot of we actually worked with your mayor a few times, supported him in a few instances where he wanted to testify on something. So even though Littleton's not a member, we're still happy to, we are stronger if there are elected officials or local government representatives doing this kind of work. And so even when you're not a member, we're happy to work with those individuals and support them. But we'll do a lot of we can write your talking points, we can get you registered among our members. There's some that have a lot of experience at the legislature, but most have very little or none. And so for our perspective, it's let's make it as easy as possible. So we'll like write the talking points. You can read them the way we wrote them. You can adapt them to your needs. You can throw them away and use your own. Like we're not prescribing what folks say. Our job is make it as easy as possible to plug in people. And one result of that is we get lots of local elected officials who testify at legislative hearings and regulatory hearings. And those elected officials their voice has a power by virtue of their title that is recognized by legislators and regulators and the governor's office and all the other policymakers. So this just gives you some sense of the span. If it has a nexus to climate, we at least think about, do we want to engage or not? And if it has a climate and real local government nexus, we almost always do engage. I'll give you an example or two of that in a second. This is just a sense of what's happening in this session. It's really hard to say. Usually in the sessions, most of the results, we don't really see the results until the last few weeks of the session. And often there might be 25% of the results we won't know until the session's over. And then we see if the governor, like the bill gets signed or the bill gets passed in the waning hours, and then we have to wait to see if the governor will sign it or veto it or whatever. One example I wanted to mention is a bill that it's not resolved yet, so I can't tell you if it turned out well in the end, but the bill as introduced would have basically required every local government in the state, with the exceptions for really small jurisdictions, to use this very specific software for automated permitting of solar installations for residential. And a bunch of our members said, hold on, that doesn't actually integrate with our system. So if this passes and we have to use this software, it's going to cost us a bunch of money to figure out how to get these things to talk. And hey, this doesn't actually look at our zoning. So if you need to do a zoning code compliance piece, if that's part of the workflow, the software doesn't do that. So our members raised a whole bunch of questions, and the sponsors were really committed to doing the bill in the way it was introduced. But we turned out a bunch of people, did a bunch of work, and they ended up last week amending the bill it was sort of two pieces. One is amending the bill to just focus on an existing grant program and solve some of the existing problems. There's a grant program that's designed to make it easy for local governments that want to adopt the software, but it had these barriers in the inadvertent but real, like you had to spend the money within a short period of time of having gotten the money. And that for local governments, that doesn't really fit how local governments do work and things like that. So that was a good instance of where we were able to push back against a bill that was well-intentioned, but the mechanics were terrible from a how do we actually implement it standpoint. And we got a commitment from the sponsors to circle back over the summer and let's figure out, is there a way we can do something that's going to help local governments automate their permitting systems or speed them up, because our members all want those systems to go faster. It just has to be something that actually makes sense. So that's an example of, we do a lot of work on bills that are well-intentioned. Maybe they're not well-intentioned, often they are, but they are okay if we can make some tweaks so that the structure actually fits with how local governments do what they do. And then I won't talk about any of these except unless you have questions about any of them, but these are just examples of rulemakings and other regulatory proceedings that we've represented or we've been part of. And they vary in like how much they matter for suburban communities versus West Slope communities or others, but huge impacts often, like all the Air Quality Control Commission, the AQCC work on ozone has enormous implications for everybody in the Front Range from a health standpoint, climate standpoint, and those are have been incredibly contentious and difficult. And our members, even the larger members by and large, don't have capacity to engage in regulatory proceedings. The legislature is one place, and a lot of our members will have a lobbyist that represents the jurisdiction on everything. So whether climate makes the list of priorities becomes an internal question for the jurisdiction, which is why they joined us, because that's what we do. But on the regulatory side, very few local governments have the capacity to engage. So we do a ton of that work. And then I mentioned this already, our strength, I think fundamentally, our superpower, as it were, is amplifying the voices of local elected officials and other local government officials in these key strategic ways at these key moments in these key venues, because those voices carry so much weight if they're used strategically. And so most of what we do is let's figure out how to get those voices in the right place in the right time and right way. So these are examples of things that we do. I mentioned the testimony, but the same thing is true with opinion pieces. We'll do lots of our members like to write op-eds or want help. They might draft it and ask us for for support on the details, where they'll ask us to draft something and we give it to them and then they can, again, do whatever they want. We know who all the opinion page editors are, so we can help them with the submissions, all those kinds of things. So it's basically all of these things that are designed to make sure local government voices show up in the right way at the right time. And then these are mostly outdated photos now, but they're all photos of these things and examples of some op-eds in recent years. And I'll just say a couple of other quick things, and then happy to answer any questions you guys have. I think the core reason that jurisdictions join CC4CA is that they want some agency in state level climate policy decision-making, which by and large local governments don't tend to have. That's the core of it. But I mentioned a bunch of those other things I think that are drivers as well, or that are part of the package. So yeah, we want to have a voice, but it sure is nice to get all of this intel about what's happening at the legislative session, because we would not know it otherwise, or we would never know where to plug in. Individual jurisdiction could hire a lobbyist to represent them on climate at the Capitol, but the cost is substantial. And so for a lot of our members, it's just the math is, yeah, we have our own lobbyists that represent us at large, but we also really want to have a voice on climate. And so they join for those kinds of reasons, and the access to the trainings and workshops. And the other thing is less formal, but if you talk to folks that are in the coalition, I think the relationships between the jurisdictions, like between staff and electeds, is the other piece. It's less tangible, but we hear that all the time. Like I met that person at this thing, we were able to call that person and learn that they're tackling the same problem we are. Or we have an annual meeting in June, which if you all join and you do it before then, it would be awesome if you sent your board rep or several people to come to that. It's in early June, excuse me. But that's like, everybody meets and interacts. And I know that like you all, the sustainability folks have networks, and that's really powerful. This is like, let's elevate that statewide, and it crosses county and muni, and it crosses elected and staff. And the result is a lot of knowledge sharing and rapport, and just like strength through community kinds of stuff. So I am happy to answer anything that's helpful to you. Thank you very much for the chance to fill you in.
Thank you. This is awesome. Question, does it cost to be a member? What is kind of if a jurisdiction joins, what does that look like?
Yeah, it does. About half of our budget comes from member dues, and it's based on population. For Littleton, it would be, I think it's $5,300 a year. So we have it's just a due schedule tiered out by population. If you look at the schedule, I'll mention there's one funky thing about it that's probably not relevant to you, but everybody asks. There are different tiers of membership. So there's the basic membership, and then there's like base plus and core and so on. And that has no bearing at all on the benefits of membership or the role you have. We have a bunch of jurisdictions that want to contribute more than the base membership. And we used to do it ad hoc, and we finally just came up with this system with tiers, and that's super easy then for those jurisdictions that want to do more. They can go to the council and say, hey, we want to be a core level member this year. And so we don't ever arm twist or expect anybody to be at a different level. Everybody, I can't think of a jurisdiction that didn't join at the base level. So that $5,300 is the base level for a community of 45,000, if I've got the right number. And then, yeah, you can go more later if you want, you don't have to.
Where does the other half of your funding come from?
Right now, there are a handful of philanthropic foundations that have been very invested in Colorado, and it's been awesome. Like this federal concierge program where we have a dedicated staff member who works with our members on federal funding and state funding, that we were able to do that through a grant from a philanthropic foundation, because they're very interested in seeing those federal dollars get deployed. So we are careful not to take, frankly, we care a lot about that balance. We want to make sure we can run our basic operations off of member dues so that we're not ultimately accountable to anybody except our members. But while there are philanthropic foundations that are aligned and we can get money to do good advocacy work, we for sure take advantage of it.
So I'm curious, because you talked about how you set legislative priorities for things that you go after, and that sounds like a collective process that members lead. And there's like a legislative committee.
Yep.
How are your overarching priorities set? Are they solely set by members? Like, would Littleton have an equal seat at the table as those other members? And do those overall members have an equal seat at the table with the other donors? Or how are all those
Great question.
priorities set?
Yeah, the philanthropic foundations have no seat at the table. So for our perspective, if there's a funder that's interested in funding a thing and it aligns with what we want to do anyway, that's awesome. We are happy to work with them and see if there's a way to make that work. But they have no influence on the policy setting. They don't have any seat. The only seats at the table are the members. And I skipped over one piece that makes my description of the craziness on paper of the nonprofit structure sound even crazier, but again, it works remarkably well. And this is to your question. The board has a policy statement, which is just a collection basically of policy positions. And that's not the priorities, but that's we support policies that result in improved efficiency of buildings or like that, those kinds of policy positions. And in order to become a member,
Hold it up for you.
oh, thank you. In order to become a member.
Yeah, she shared that with us.
Oh, good, okay. So to become a member, the local elected body has to pass a resolution expressing support for this. And that's how we make sure there's alignment. You don't become a member unless you're actually aligned, and we know that because your council adopted a resolution that says we support this. Once you're a member, you have veto power over any changes to it. So every member, it's a consent, basically a unanimous consent structure. So any proposed changes to these policy positions require unanimous consent among our members, which we define as nobody objects. And so we do sometimes there's some members that don't love this language, but they can live with it. And so, okay, cool. As long as nobody's objecting, we can make that change. But you know, when you become a member that this thing can't change if you object to a change. And we do that generally every other year. We have a process where we go through this and update it and smooth it out. We're talking now about maybe rewriting it. But over time, it's like software systems, like it's bigger and bigger. We keep adding stuff and tweaking stuff. I think we may actually next year do kind of let's see if we can rewrite this thing so that the whole thing is simpler and shorter and easier. But even if we restructure it at that scale, if Littleton's a member, nothing changes unless Littleton can live with those changes. And then on the priorities, it's not technically unanimous consent, but functionally we work really hard to make sure that we chart a path that everyone's cool with. So typically on priorities, staff will usually bring recommendations. So here's what we know about what's going to happen in the session, what the leadership priorities are, where the momentum is, what the budget looks like, all of those things. And based on all that, we think this might be a good package of prioritizing for the legislature, for instance. And then the legislative committee decides. There'll be lots of discussion back and forth, and ultimately we end up with a set of priorities that governs how much effort we put into different things. This is really good.
How many staff do you have?
There are 6 total. 3 of those are part-time. So there's 3 basically core staff, and that's part of the outside funding. We'll often use a contract model for those dollars because it just helps us protect against getting bloated and then suddenly having to lay off a bunch of people. So
Yeah.
yeah. So it's basically 3 core and then 3 other folks for project level.
Sounds like you guys are doing a ton with like a small team.
I hope I can.
Yeah.
I think we have a high ass kickiness per dollar. I hope it's.
Yeah. That goes in the record. It's yeah.
It is being recorded, but. These are also all on their website too, which I linked in I can send it all out tomorrow as well, if y'all wanna take a look through this. I will say that, I put together sort of a testimony before they came, so council has heard this and was very interested in getting y'all's opinion on it. So if you have any other questions that would help council make a decision now, for Jacob, or just in general that come up, like now's the time, or you can always email me or Jacob, I suppose. If you have anything that comes up later for you, as if this is something, they all ultimately decide to recommend to council to join.
Do you have any concerns? Okay. I mean, if they're waiting to hear from us, I think we could probably recommend doing it.
Yes, we can discuss more too.
Yeah, it's not a huge expense.
I mean, I can duck out and you can have. Process wise, we're super flexible. It's like really whatever works for you all. This is really typical where it starts with the environmental or climate sustainability board, the advisory board of the jurisdiction that then makes a recommendation to the council that then pursues it further. We don't, again, we don't really care. It's whatever process works for you. But I've mentioned that because we're also, if you have members of council that want to meet with us, if council wants to have us like a study session environment, or just put it on the agenda and have us show up where we can answer questions, additional presentations, like really whatever it is you all need to, it doesn't serve our interest for a jurisdiction to join unless you're actually aligned. So from our perspective, it's not really, we're not really trying to convince you to join so much as help you figure out if it's a good fit. And it'd be awesome. We'd be thrilled to have Littleton as a member. I think Littleton it's the southern burbs are like, there's a political power there. And I think Littleton would add a lot to the coalition and hopefully get a lot out of it. So we'd love to have you, but also only, it doesn't make sense if you're not, if the council's not really there. And it's not like we need a unanimous vote of the council, but the council just in a normal way has to have a majority that support a resolution expressing support for these things. So whatever you all need from us, other information or meetings or presentations, happy to do.
On your website, is there because speaking about, making sure we align with the values of the organization and the mission and everything, is that on, and this was probably in your presentation as well, so forgive me, but I just want to look over that. And that's, I think, an important thing to take to council to say, here's the top values and their mission. And, we might say, it sounds like that aligns, but it'd be easy to put that as part of a recommendation to make sure they do.
Yeah, so that is this document and that is.
Okay, so that would be the one to reference. Got it, thank you.
And the way that we'll typically explain it is to say, it's not that the city council has to fervently support there's 30 specific positions, has to fervently support all 30 of them. But it should be like generally supporting all of them and not have any real heartburn about any of them. If there's
Well, you're looking at just like the topics even, like energy efficiency, transportation,
Yeah.
land use, so like, I feel like that'd be a good way to almost sum it up.
Yeah, that whatever works on your end for sure. And I want to give you one other, I'm sorry, I hope I'm probably taking it.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay,
We don't have anything else on the agenda after this, do we?
One other example that's to your question as well of how all of this gets operationalized. We have we have a decent number of instances where there's a policy that fits our policy statement. So, okay, cool, it meets that test, which means we are generally supportive of it. But then when we get into the detailed discussion, we have one or more members that they have concerns or even objections to some piece of it. And a really good example of that is that we have a few members that have municipal electric utilities. Most of our members are either Excel or they're electric co-ops, but a handful have municipal utilities. And in that case, our jurisdiction is actually the utility. And so they think about the world differently. Oh, what are these obligations going to be on the utility? And so if there's a policy that's moving at the state level that's going to impose some obligation on utilities to do a better job on, say, greenhouse gas emissions related to natural gas, for instance, and we have one of our members says, hey, we have a problem with that provision, we'll work with them to figure out, is there some way, can we come up with a nuance that you can live with? Ultimately, you have to be able to live with it or we won't do it. And we usually come up with something. Often with the municipal utilities, it's really just exempt utilities. And from a higher level climate perspective, maybe that may not be the environmental activists would probably prefer that the unis be part of it, the utilities be part of it. But from a pragmatic, this is a coalition and we don't take positions unless our members are okay with it. And way better to get, from our perspective, something passed that applies to Excel and all the co-ops than to not get something passed. We can live with, that's just like the sausage making of politics. We can live with the trade-off and we'll figure out how do we do that so that our members, the ones who are concerned, can live with it. And I mention that because land use is a great instance in SB 213, which is 3 years ago now, I think, which was a hugely controversial land use bill where the state legislature was essentially going to usurp a bunch of traditional land use authorities from local governments. And local governments in general flipped for good reason. But our members were not of like mind. We actually had one member that supported the bill, a bunch of members that hated it, and a bunch of members that had more complex positions. And so we were not in a position that we could take a support, or we couldn't even, we were not in a position where we could take a support or opposed position because we didn't have unanimity. We were able, the nuanced position we were able to carve out is, okay, if this thing passes, are there changes that we would want to see that would make it at least work better? Even for you members that don't want it to pass, there's a bunch of stuff in here that if it passes, it's going to be really terrible for you as a local government. So we were able to carve out a amended position that wasn't, we'll support the bill if these amendments happen. It was just, these are amendments that we think the bill needs to be a better bill. And ultimately that bill died. The Senate and the House passed different versions, but the first chamber, and I'm forgetting which was first, adopted most of the amendments that we had laid out as priorities. The whole thing died because in the end it was the original bill versus the amended bill. But if it had passed, it would have had a bunch of amendments in it that at least would have lessened the negative impact to local government. So that's just another example of where we serve our job is serve our members. We want strong climate protection, but in the way that our members look at it, and we'll go to great lengths to make sure we don't take a position that is a problem for a member, and also can we find a way to nuance something or finesse something so that it really does, whoever has the objection, it works for them. So if Littleton were in a position where we have a few members that are often the one that's like, hey, no, that doesn't work for us, and they like everybody teases them, but in the end, it's like everybody gets it. Everybody in the coalition gets that a single member has the right, and nobody really, it's not like there's no social pressure not to. It's like, really, if this is a problem, let's figure it out. Land use was such a mess.
Well, thank you so much. I think this is absolutely fascinating. Really cool work.
Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Please do reach out with any other questions.
I'll be in touch with you about decisions made, our next steps, and moving from there.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to meet you, and congrats on your, and condolences, I guess. Same for both of you.
Thanks.
I'll just say from a staff perspective, if the board's in favor of joining this organization, then I can take the resolution. So the other part I think we need to figure out, we'll have to check with Colleen about who we want to put on the board, but we can figure all that out. So to you, you want us to take it forward.
I think it may be a quick roundtable just to hear kind of everyone's initial feedback on it.
And I feel like there's a lot of communities that are very climate forward that are on that group, and it made me feel pretty good. What they're doing.
Is it possible to have the document up again? And
Sure. Do you want to look at the policies or the presentation?
All the policy.
Policies. Yeah. There's some of the general ones. And then you can see the communities.
I mean, a lot of this, and was like a super quick glance, I haven't really like obviously read through all the policy positions, but a lot of it does seem to align with, for instance, our, like the document we put together.
I picked out certain ones of your recommendations that they really are, you need this, so like removing natural gas hookups and those subsidies, that's state, but this is a way to get at some of those recommendations that are a little bit, they're just bigger than one municipality, as he was saying.
Like the equity was one of their core values, basically.
So I read through this just very quickly beforehand, and to me, there wasn't anything like shocking or offending or like, I wasn't too concerned. I think the question that I have, I'm kind of skeptical of coalitions. I'm kind of skeptical of like consensus-based decision-making among 44 and growing members. At the same time, I think that like I don't know what the city of Littleton's budget is, but $5,000 to test something like this and see what value there is. If we think that we can put someone forward from the council or from staff that can be an active member and can like fully participate and like, wring the juice out of this thing for a year and see if it's worth their time, see if it is worth it in terms of outcomes and can point to tangible impact, then $5,000 seems like a small investment. And so I would say like, even, like I said, I'm relatively skeptical. However, the barrier to entry is it's pretty low. Their policy positions are, I think, generally in line with what I saw in the stewardship plan. This could be a relatively easy decision to try it out.
Great.
Are there any risks?
Just a year doesn't appeal to
I
us.
think it kind of aligns with what we've been talking about with understanding what other communities around us are doing too. So it's almost like kind of dovetails into that as well. We can get ideas from the communities, the networking aspect. I think there's like the non-tangible benefits that he was talking about that maybe are worth the 5,000 just to be part of this group, to see what Boulder's doing and see what, or have access to the people there, in all these other communities, so.
I was talking to I got some testimonies before having CC4CA come, and they said for their council member, they were really into climate and environment, and they were frustrated with local politics, but this made them stay on council. And like, this was the reason I stayed on council and like continued to drive this at the local level, was because I was able to connect with all of these other council members across the state.
Misery.
And I thought that was, yeah, I mean, perhaps, yes. And I don't know, I thought that was a cool, part of it. And they all get together. They have that summit once a year for the members. But regardless of when it would be able to get through council, because council has to agree to all of, as he was saying, like generally agree to them. We'd still be able to get to that's at least that like big summit portion for the council that wants to join.
Couple thoughts. One, $5,000 feels like nothing. And when he said that, I was like, oh, like, why are we already doing this? But, cause that was honestly one of I was so afraid he was gonna come out and say $75,000 a year. So as mentioned, I think the barrier to entry is super low and not like a high stakes financial thing, which I think has always been an issue when wanting to do something. Is it cost money and, is it in the budget? And it like, I guess maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but is $5,000 something that is reasonable where even though we didn't plan for it in the budget this year, it's doable?
We could find $5,000.
Okay. And then my other thought is when it comes to climate action, I do believe that, a lot of the like greenhouse gas, I think is a great example or maybe not so much greenhouse gas, but air quality. Like a lot of it is so regional that you can try to do something locally and you have so much more of an impact when you go to that next level and the state, for the state level, as much as I would love things to happen on the federal level. So I think without having fully dove into this, I think I'm very supportive of this with the low barrier of entry. Laura, you mentioned you had reviewed this with council already, or like?
I think it was just not reviewed. They essentially approved for them to come and talk to y'all because they wanted your opinion
Okay.
about it.
So you didn't necessarily get any like reactions
I
from
think they were
them?
excited and intrigued by the opportunity.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
kind of it. It was just, via email. I sent them the testimonies that I compiled and the pricing structure, and they were like, we're super interested in getting ESB's opinion, if you could have them come watch the board. And I was like, that'd be great. So when I was interning for the city of Arvada, I actually heard CC4CA speak then to their board. And I was just like so intrigued by them then, and then was shocked to find out how nimble of an operation they are. essentially a grassroots nonprofit engaging with the whole state is really impressive, so. And then once I talked to other people I know in the Front Range, specifically doing like counterparts to my work that have been working with it, they were all like, yes, no, like, if your council is for it, do it. And a lot of them are saying, you know, sometimes it's politics, right? If that's not what the tides of the politics are at the time, but.
It was interesting hearing him say, what was it, Westminster was in it, left it.
Yeah, I was talking to their sustainability manager last week actually about it, and he was like, yeah, I was there for the whole ride, it was fun. Yeah, that's all he really had to say, like, it's just politics.
Have you reviewed this in detail and?
I have, I think it does, I mean, I can keep going, it does align very well with everything that we've discussed, with a lot of your plan, with what I understand our current council to feel about most of this, at least the majority of council, so like, you know, we're gonna go to a vote. But I think, yeah, just none of it, when I read through it, you know, I was like, wow, this is something it's out of left field.
And again, I'm new here, but I am a skeptic. And so the reason I was asking about how they're funded, sometimes things like this are funded by like industry interest groups. Like the wind energy, whatever, which is named something confusingly not wind energy, you know? And so I'm just thinking of like the due diligence steps here.
You can dive into their donors. I used to work at a grassroots nonprofit, so I know all the methods to
They
actually.
should have their
It's all
990
public-
out there.
It's all publicly available. I used to do that a lot for my old job. So I'm happy to dig into that more if you want more information.
Yeah, honestly, like I think that would be good, cause it all sounds like he sat here and told us all these things, there's like, can't argue with that, this policies.
I know of a
Yeah,
few of the
reasonable, but-
foundations that
Yeah.
do donate, and
Yeah.
they're just philanthropic foundations. That's what they do.
Yeah,
But
hopefully,
yeah.
that's the case, yeah.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah.
So I can dig into that more a little bit on their donors. I actually used to run programs at a nonprofit that basically was this, but for other nonprofits. So I'm very, very familiar with this kind of model, and sort of what they're about and what they're after. And I mean, yeah, you actually are not gonna really get a special interest, like based on the support and like the evidence they have for what they have passed and supported at the state level. I'd be shocked if there was anyone oil and gas that was trying to fund this, but I can definitely, right, exactly. I can definitely dive into that.
It's also good, I mean, I think it's a good sign that they're like a small team, that they're like focused on collective action. Yeah, I guess my point is the due diligence before we commit the city to join some.
Yeah, I can dive into their funding, and I might just end up sending the whole board an email on funds. I mean, I guess we don't have to move before the June meeting. It might not even work for like whoever council wants to join, right? Of course it wouldn't, right? They couldn't go, that wouldn't work for their schedule or something. So I don't think we don't have to rush, and the legislative session's almost over. So I don't think it's.
Yeah, this month.
It's not, you know, it ends in May.
Early May, like.
I could also bring it
6 or
back in
7.
May. Y'all actually have, so next month, there's a guest speaker coming who runs a nonprofit called Frontline Farming. And it's a community farm, also a CSA, and he also has his PhD and is a professor at University of Colorado Boulder teaching about sustainable food systems. So he's gonna come and talk to y'all for a bit, and then there's just as a fun dichotomy at the end, it's gonna be internal city staff wanted to come talk about some building code updates that are coming down the line like the next week, and just wanted to run it by y'all, let you know what was going on about, I think it's for model, so like it's all the stuff that we've discussed on model solar, model electric, but they'll have more background and more time to answer questions. Their presentation will be much shorter than Damian Thompson. That's who Dr. Thompson's coming from Frontline Farming. So I can send out all the bios and all the information about them too. So maybe we'll have a little time at the beginning if I like find some digging, but I might just put it in that email and then we can like quickly discuss before the meeting starts or.
And do we have to physically be here in this official meeting to make a decision on whether we recommend something like this? I'm just trying to connect this to what we heard earlier. Yeah.
Do you mean as opposed to like a consensus over email or something like that?
Yeah, like if you send something like we didn't find anything, blah, 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 and we're all like, yeah, we had a chance to read this thing that we all didn't read beforehand.
I think generally when it's something, well, I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but generally we do try to do a like consensus in person. I'm trying to think if that's ever been.
I think so, just because of public meeting law,
Yeah.
as we were saying. I mean, if you wanted to say, I hand over the final say just to the chair and I just work with the chair and maybe vice chair, that maybe, but I
I
think.
suppose, you know, there have been things where there have been like multi-meeting efforts, and if you're not able to make the meeting where you make the decision, you could like email and say, you know, I support this, I won't be there, but I support it, or something like that, and then we could take that into
We could
account.
just carve out like a couple of minutes at the beginning of May to discuss it so that we can keep moving forward with it. But as I said, I don't think there's a rush and I'd rather bring it so that the public can hear it and it's in the meetings and everything. It's better that way.
Scott, do you have an opinion? You've been awful quiet.
I can keep scrolling, I'm sorry, I know you've been reading, and so I don't know at what pace, I just kind of randomly remember and scroll. It's all on their website too.
I appreciate you asking, Hannah. It feels benign. Not revolutionary. I can't imagine that it's gonna make the type of difference that you know, these days we're probably all hoping for to our local economy. But it doesn't hurt anything. Has been said, cost of entry is very small and very achievable. $5,000 is, and then, you know, the context of the city budget is nothing. But I would not expect that a decade from now, we feel like we have benefited in any tremendous way from this.
I don't know, when I spoke to my counterpart at Adams County, she was saying it helps council decide to add more sustainability staff and more capacity. Like, there are just things that it helped elected officials become aware of, like it can help become aware of like the extended producer responsibility laws that are coming and how that impacts local government and how other municipalities are navigating that, right? Like, does that mean X or this? And I think in that sense, there was a lot of more like behind the scenes information that helped inform how the city ended up wanting to commit to climate. So that, I mean, those were just some of the testimonies that I gathered when I talked to some of my counterparts, and I guess it would also depend on how much the person that's the liaison ends up engaging, right? But I think it could still provide a lot of benefit in that regard. Like,
Yeah, I have no opposition to it. I have no real expectations for it. If
Yeah.
you know,
I guess no expectations and a tiny benefit would be, you know, you'd be so excited, right?
You won't be disappointed.
Right. Set yourself up for success. And I mean, the thing is what we heard with Westminster is we can always leave. Is what I heard, and rejoin.
Sounds like unless you find any red flags, we would recommend.
I'll dig into some of the funding and
Out of curiosity, with what you've, you know, heard from your counterparts or have looked into, would y'all recommend, and it sounds like this will probably be up to council, but do you think you'd be better suited to have like you sit on the board or someone from council?
I would be excited. I mean, I would love to do it. I love policy and environmental policy, but I think it's a great opportunity for them. And I think we do have some board members that would be very excited to do this. And I have heard though that even so, there are different committees that I as a staff, like you can have a secondary person, so I can also sit on it and learn things and be on those committees. I just wanna have voting power. It's like who you decide has that voting power. And I do think it's important I think it should be a council person. And I feel like someone would be very excited right, maybe even our own beef, come on, I don't know. Just saying. But I think that it's an exciting opportunity for one of them to just be like, all right, what are the issues you're having with this in your municipality as a council member? What pushback do you get from your vocal minority, right? Like, I think that that could be really helpful. I would love to do it, but I think it's a great opportunity for a council member.
Should be an elected representative, right?
Yeah. I think ideally, yes, and I do think that one of them would be very excited to do it. So I don't think that that will be an issue in terms of getting someone to. I will happily do it if they do not want to. But
Cool. So it sounds like maybe we'll just kind of sleep on it, do a little research, and then kind of take the first few minutes of the next meeting to kind of formally say we want to.
I'll put it in the agenda and then maybe we'll talk about it at the beginning of next meeting and then very quickly get into Damien, guest speaker, and I'll send the bio, as well as gets Matt Knight and Tim Steinwinder. So I'll send, if they have a presentation, they might get it to me right before, I don't know. But theirs is just about all of the building codes, most of which were listed in your plan. I think they just wanted to be like, hi, these are happening, what are your questions? Cool. So, yeah, we can, unless,
Only 10 minutes left.
yeah, unless we wanna, if there are any pressing items, we could end a little early, up to y'all.
Any updates from staff or committee?
Looks like you were.
Well, I was just gonna say, if you happen to talk with the executive director or email or something, just obviously, I appreciate that he came and made the effort to present. And, you know, yeah, just appreciate it.
I can let him know that y'all really appreciated it. And I'm sure he would like hearing that.
And then remind me, I think that Brent, you'd said this, but y'all would put together the formal recommendation? Okay.
Yeah, and maybe I would put it and present it to you maybe in June, if you sign off in May, we present it to you in June and you would say, this looks great. We agree with your memo and recommendation, and then we could do all the back end work to.
I mean, or if you guys
Yeah.
decided to join the organization, we could do the council communication of the resolution on
Yeah.
staff level and just take it to council.
Cause I don't think it's gonna be very different than, it's gonna be adopting those policy positions that are already set, right? So, and I'm going to probably recommend that they amongst themselves decide what elected official they want, and I can offer myself as a backup. However, I think there always has to be a voting, like a member, and so they have to have like a backup person, and they're like, it's usually a sustainability staff member that can stand in place with some type of written approval. So,
Yeah.
something, there's some technicality there, but they said that I can always like listen in and be able to keep y'all updated and tell you what's happening at the state level. I do think, yeah, the state's doing a lot of really cool things, and
I think it's a really great way to stay plugged into what the state is doing because it can be hard to keep up with it.
I spent like an hour the other day just trying to go through all of the 2025 bills, and I was like, wow, they introduce so many every day that it's overwhelming as, one person to be like, all right, which ones are related to local government, climate, all the things, so I think it would be helpful, but I'll do some more digging and get back to y'all, and
Thanks for bringing him in.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
yeah, of course, and I think it'll be really interesting to have Damien come next time. He has a lot of knowledge. So that's exciting too.
Thoughts on timing of, maybe just a reminder for me on timing of waste management?
Yeah. So I'm going to be tabling probably at some community meet, greet and eats so that more people can just come ask any questions. Y'all are welcome to be there. I think there's one in June, one in July. There's a study session on July 22nd in which I think that we're presenting to council sort of the broad plan that we've been working with this consultant through the CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment, CDPHE program. And then they are coming on August 19th to present to council to adopt their overall plan, which will include 7 specific city recommendations for each participating city, and 3 agreed upon regional recommendations between the cities. It does not actually tie, I clarified all this, it doesn't actually tie us to anything. It's just like, we agree that these recommendations and like we adopt this plan, but it's not saying like, yeah, we're gonna go out and do all of these things in a certain timeline. That would be a separate process where if there was a recommendation of organized contracting or whatever the case may be, that would be a separate, entirely separate process of like, we have to read the ordinances, and if that becomes, part of it, but I will definitely probably need y'all's help in writing a letter of support. That's gonna be big for coming up with the plan, and I think they're gonna probably have a lot of questions, and so I'm hoping the consultant also can help, because they have some really niche trash knowledge that I do not have on the 19th when it comes to a regular council meeting, not just study session. But it's, we're gonna keep taking it at I hope we can bring people along as much as I want like everything to happen tomorrow, and we all do. It doesn't work that way particularly for this topic. It's touchy, so we're gonna keep having conversations and making sure that people understand, and I've been working with the comms team a lot too, and getting them more information about the study that we've been participating in, so that people can hear it as, sort of as this is going, and not like an overnight change. It's the hope, but that's sort of the overall update.
I don't know, maybe we can share part of the presentation, well, it'll be early July one.
Yeah, we can, I can try to get that compiled before, like, for their July meeting, and have them weigh in on what we present during the
Right.
study session, as well as the letter of support will be really important too, for adoption for August, so it might just be that I write something and we wordsmith it or y'all accept it type of thing, but that's kind
That
of,
meeting's July 2nd, so
yeah,
see how many people are here.
sure, that's also better.
Okay, anything else? Is it okay if we adjourn 4 minutes or?
Do it.
Okay,
You have to read this.
we're adjourned.
Okay, great.
Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah.